Hey there, all you philosophy fans out there. Ready to dive deep into some medieval philosophy?
Always ready.
Awesome. Today, we're tackling a thing that you might not know as well as, say, Aquinas,
Ah, yes.
Peter John Olivi.
A fascinating figure.
He was a 13th century Franciscan philosopher. Not quite as famous, I'll grant you.
Definitely not a household name.
But trust me, his ideas.
Powerful.
Yeah, powerful stuff. And maybe even more so for a philosopher like you listening in.
Absolutely. Olivi really makes you think.
We're using the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy entry on him as our guide today.
A great resource.
Yeah, so buckle up.
Olivi was a real trailblazer. He wasn't afraid to challenge the big names, even Aristotle himself.
Right, like taking on Aristotle. That's brave.
He had this way of looking at fundamental questions. Really makes you rethink things.
It's like he's shaking the foundations of philosophy.
In a way, he is.
So let's start with something that really caught my eye.
What's that?
Olivi's take on Aristotle's categories. Substance, quality, quantity.
The building blocks of Aristotelian metaphysics.
Exactly. But Olivi wasn't buying it. At least, not entirely.
He saw them as conceptual tools, not these independent, fixed realities.
So he's saying, like, hey, these categories are how we make sense of the world.
But don't assume that's how the world actually is. That's Olivi in a nutshell.
So he's not saying our concepts are wrong or just made up,
No, not at all.
just that they're our way of grasping reality.
But not necessarily a perfect one-to-one map of reality.
Ah, okay, I see.
To bridge that gap, he introduces this fascinating concept, rationes reales,
Naciones reales.
real aspects. Think of it this way. You look at a tree, right?
Okay, I'm picturing a tree.
You see its height, its color, its shape, how it relates to other trees around it.
Yeah, all those things.
Those aspects are real, they exist, but they're not separate entities floating out there.
So they're different facets of the same underlying real tree.
Precisely. Different ways we humans understand that one reality.
This is really interesting because he's navigating this tricky path between nominalism, where concepts are just names, and realism, where they perfectly reflect some eternal forms.
He's definitely walking a tightrope there.
He's trying to find a middle ground, saying, look, our concepts are real, but...
But they're not the whole story.
Right.
It's a debate that's still going strong in philosophy today, which shows how forward-thinking Olivi was.
Yeah, for sure. And rations reales makes you really think,
It does.
about how we know things, the relationship between our minds and the world, the whole
shebang.
Exactly.
It reminds us that we always understand reality through our concepts, and Olivi's pushing us to examine those concepts, their limits, their power.
To think critically. I like that.
He was a critical thinker, for sure.
Now, another area where Olivi gets you thinking is hylomorphism. The idea that everything is made of matter and form.
Ah, yes, hylomorphism, a classic.
Classic stuff. But Olivi adds this twist. I found it fascinating, and I bet you will too.
Let's hear it.
He applies hylomorphism to everything except God. And I mean everything.
Including.
Angels and even our souls.
He didn't shy away from bold claims.
Nope, he didn't. He says that even souls have a kind of matter.
Which he calls spiritual matter.
Spiritual matter.
It sounds a bit paradoxical, right?
Yeah. How could something spiritual be material? I bet that raised some eyebrows back then.
Oh, you bet it did.
What was he thinking?
Well, it was a bold move. Stepping outside the traditional Aristotelian box, Olivi was essentially saying anything that changes, that develops.
Needs some kind of material component.
Right, something with the potential to be actualized, so even souls, which can grow and change,
Need the spiritual matter.
as they're around for that potential.
So he wasn't saying our souls are like physically material, like our bodies.
No, not like that.
More like a metaphysical concept.
Precisely. A way of understanding how spiritual beings can still be dynamic.
Capable of growth and transformation.
Exactly. He's not trying to reduce the soul to matter.
More like finding a way to account for their dynamism within hylomorphism.
A clever solution.
It's a very intriguing idea. Makes you think about the soul, its relationship to the body. What about immortality?
It opens a whole new can of worms, doesn't it?
For sure.
Olivi was full of surprises like that, reminding us that simple concepts like matter and form, well, they can be incredibly complex.
And nuanced.
Yes, very nuanced. Olivi pushes us to think beyond simple categories, to see the depth of reality.
To go deeper.
Always deeper.
Now let's talk about something that philosophers love to debate. Free will.
A perennial favorite.
Olivi didn't hold back here either. He was a libertarian, through and through.
Way ahead of his time on that one.
Big time. He argued that God doesn't directly participate in the actions of created beings.
A radical claim for the 13th century.
It is. Most philosophers back then were all about God's active involvement in everything.
Right, God in the driver's seat.
But Olivi's saying God's action is more like setting the stage.
And then letting creation unfold according to its own nature.
Like winding up a clock and letting it run.
That's a great analogy.
It's a way to reconcile God's power with our autonomy, right? Especially when it comes to free will.
Exactly. A bold attempt to balance divine sovereignty and human freedom.
So what did Olivi think about the will itself?
This is where things get really interesting, especially for a philosopher.
Tell me more.
Olivi argued that the will is self-determining.
Meaning?
It can choose even against its own inclinations, its habits.
So even if I have a strong virtue like courage, I could still choose to act cowardly.
That's what Olivi would say.
Wow.
It's not just about picking between options. It's about the will's fundamental power to determine itself.
So he's taking a really radical stance on freedom.
Absolutely.
It's not just freedom from outside forces, it's this deeper freedom, the power to choose your own course, even against your own tendencies.
That's the core of Olivi's libertarianism.
That's some AV stuff.
It is.
Makes you think about choice, responsibility, agency, the whole deal.
It really does, and it's a great example of how Olivi takes these classic philosophical problems and pushes them further, forces us to reconsider things.
To look at them with fresh eyes.
Exactly.
And this idea of the will's self-determination, it's closely tied to another big theme in Olivi's thought, personhood.
Ah, yes, personhood.
He was one of the first to really articulate a strong concept of personhood, wasn't he?
He was a real pioneer in that area.
And he connected it to self-awareness and free will.
A very modern idea, really.
It is. He argued that being a person isn't just about having a certain kind of soul or body.
It's about this capacity for self-governance, making choices that are truly your own.
So to be a person is to be self-determining.
And self-reflective, that's Olivi's view.
It's like he's foreshadowing ideas we see in existentialism about autonomy, individuality, creating yourself through choices.
He definitely prefigures some of those themes.
It's a powerful message. Really resonates with philosophy as a way of life, a process of self-discovery.
Self-creation, even.
Exactly.
And I think that's one of the things that makes Olivi so relevant today. He's not just giving us abstract theories, but a vision of what it means to be human.
To live a meaningful life.
In a world that constantly challenges us to define who we are,
This is amazing stuff.
Olivi never disappoints.
Now let's move on to another area where he breaks new ground, perception.
This is where he really shakes things up.
He completely changes how we think about perception. It's not passive, like just receiving information.
No, it's an active engagement with the world, according to Olivi.
So it's not like the world just stamps itself on our minds.
Not at all.
It's more like our minds are reaching out, actively grasping the world.
Exactly. He challenges the old idea that we passively receive sensory data through those species. Mental images, they were all the rage back then.
Ah, yes, species.
But Olivi emphasized the mind's role in attending to the world, engaging with it.
So the mind isn't just a mirror reflecting reality, it's more like...
A spotlight focusing on what's important.
Love that analogy.
He even uses the term virtual extension to describe this reaching out.
Virtual extension?
Like the mind, through attention, extends itself beyond its physical limits.
Connecting with the world?
Precisely.
Like a mental handshake with reality.
I like that. A mental handshake.
It's incredible. He almost sounds like he's anticipating modern phenomenology and cognitive science. The idea that perception is embodied, the subject plays an active role.
It's remarkable how we anticipate some of these contemporary themes, grappling with questions we're still asking today.
Amazing how a thinker from the 13th century can be so relevant.
Olivi was a true visionary.
Okay, so we've seen how Olivi challenged Aristotle's categories, introduced Rishanus Reals, applied hylomorphism in a new way, took a strong stance on free will, and revolutionized our understanding of perception.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
And all this in just the first part of our deep dive.
We've only just begun to explore the depths of Olivia's thought.
There's so much more to uncover.
And it only gets more fascinating from here. Welcome back, everyone. Last time, we were exploring Olivia's radical take on perception.
Right, how it's this active engagement with the world, not just passively taking things in.
Exactly, and that virtual extension idea, the mind reaching out to grasp the object.
That was mind-blowing. It makes you wonder what else Olivi had to say about how our minds work.
Well, get ready for more mind-blowing insights because Olivi doesn't stop there. He tackles the concept of self-awareness, and you won't believe how far he takes it.
Self-awareness. Wow, that's a big one in philosophy. You know, knowing that you are you, the foundation of consciousness, all that. What fresh perspective could Olivi possibly offer on this?
Well, he argues that self-awareness isn't limited to just the intellect, our thinking faculty. He says it extends even to the sensory powers of soul.
Hold on, our senses are self-aware. Like, how can my sense of touch, for example, be aware of itself? That seems like a stretch.
Think about it this way. How does your body react to pain or pleasure? You touch a hot stove, you instantly pull your hand back. Olivi argues this instinctive reaction shows a basic kind of self-awareness.
Okay, so it's not like my hand is having a philosophical debate about whether to move or not. It's more like a built-in, pre-reflective awareness of its own state.
Exactly. Even at the most basic level of sensation, there's this reflexivity, this turning back on oneself.
Interesting. And this reflexivity gets more complex as we move up the cognitive ladder, right?
Right. Olivi says the common sense, the faculty that integrates all our sensory information, has a more developed reflexivity. He points out that animals use their bodies in purposeful ways, suggesting an awareness of their own bodies and how the parts relate.
Like a dog knowing to use its legs for running and its mouth for barking. It's not just random muscle movements, there's coordination and purpose there.
Precisely. And Olivi considers this awareness a form of self-awareness, though less complex than what we humans experience.
So even animals have some degree of self-awareness. That's a pretty radical idea for a 13th century thinker. But of course, we humans have the most developed kind thanks to our intellect.
Yes, Olivi says the intellect has this unique capacity for complete reflexivity, a direct awareness of itself. We don't always have perfect self-knowledge, but the potential is always there.
Like we have this inner mirror, letting us reflect on our own thoughts and experiences. But here's where it gets really interesting, doesn't it? Olivi believes the highest level of reflexivity isn't in the intellect, but in the will.
Exactly. He says the will is reflective in a way even the intellect isn't. Why? Because the will can move itself to action.
So it's not just about being aware of yourself, it's about having the power to direct yourself, to choose your actions.
Precisely. The will, for Olivi, can turn back on itself, not just as an object of awareness, but as a mover, a source of action. That's what makes us truly free and responsible for our choices.
This is blowing my mind. It's like Olivi is taking free will and grounding it in this incredibly deep level of self-reflectivity. No wonder he was such a staunch libertarian.
And this ties directly into his concept of personhood. To be a person, for Olivi, isn't just about having self-awareness, but about having a will that can move itself, be the ultimate author of its actions.
It's like he's connecting self-awareness, free will, and personhood in a way that's incredibly insightful. It's almost as if he's laying the groundwork for existentialism centuries before Sartre.
That's what makes studying Olivi so rewarding, especially for a philosopher. He's constantly challenging us to think deeper, make connections between seemingly disparate ideas. And he doesn't stop there. His focus on the will's self-determination has major implications for his ethics. Remember, he was a virtue ethicist.
Yeah, but how does this radical freedom fit with the idea of developing virtuous habits? It seems like it could undermine the whole project of cultivating virtue.
Well, Olivia's take on virtue is unique. He stresses individual freedom and responsibility, even in the face of ingrained habits. For him, it's not enough to just develop good habits. You have to actively choose to act virtuously in each situation.
So the will is always the ultimate decision maker. It can choose to act in accordance with virtue or against it, regardless of our past experiences or character traits.
Exactly. He even reinterprets a pregio weakness of the will in light of this. For Olivi, it's not about being overwhelmed by emotions or failing to reason correctly. It's a deliberate choice to act against your better judgment.
Wow, that's a pretty demanding view of moral responsibility. It seems to put a lot of weight on individual choice. But it makes sense given his emphasis on the will's power and autonomy.
Right. He's basically saying we can't blame our bad choices on external factors or even ingrained habits. We are the authors of our actions, and we have to own up to them.
This is making me rethink my whole approach to ethics. It's a challenge, but a welcome one. What else does Olivi apply this radical freedom to?
Well, his political philosophy is a fascinating extension of these ideas. In fact, one of the most interesting aspects is his view on the nature of political power and authority, which connects back to his concept of dominion or ownership.
We talked about how he applied dominium to the Franciscan vow of poverty, but how does that connect to political power?
Olivi argues that political power, like ownership, is essentially a form of dominium. It's the right to exercise control over others, to govern and make decisions that affect their lives.
So it's not just about holding a position or having a title. It's about having this fundamental right to exercise dominion.
Exactly. And Olivi argues this right is ultimately grounded in the will. Just as individuals have dominion over their own actions through their will, political leaders have dominion over their subjects through their will.
It's like political power is an extension of the will's self-determination, projected onto a larger social scale.
That's a great way to put it, and this has some interesting implications for how he views the relationship between rulers and their subjects.
Well, it seems like it would place a strong emphasis on the consent of the governed. If political power is ultimately grounded in the will, wouldn't rulers need the consent of those they rule?
That's a very astute observation. While Olivi doesn't explicitly develop a theory of consent, his ideas about political power certainly lay the groundwork for such a view.
It's incredible how he's anticipating some of the core ideas of modern political thought: individual rights, limited government, the importance of consent. And to think he was writing this centuries ago.
It just goes to show how ahead of his time he was, and how his ideas about the will, self-determination, and the nature of power are still so relevant today.
This is truly a deep dive into some profound and challenging ideas. It's amazing how Olivi's thought can push us to reconsider our assumptions about everything from perception to politics.
And in the final part of our exploration, we'll delve into another fascinating area of Olivi's thought, his economic theories. You might be surprised to learn that this 13th century Franciscan friar had some insightful and even radical things to say about markets, value, and justice.
Welcome back for the final part of our Olivi deep dive. It's amazing how this 13th century thinker keeps on giving, even when it comes to topics you wouldn't expect a Franciscan friar to be tackling.
You're telling me we've seen how his ideas on the will, self-awareness, even politics were ahead of their time. But what really surprised me was that Olivia also had some fascinating things to say about economics.
Economics. Seriously. Like supply and demand, markets, all that.
Exactly. He wrote a treatise called De Contractibus, where he delves into the moral dimensions of economic activity.
So he's like applying his philosophy to real-world stuff like buying and selling.
Right. It's like he's trying to figure out, how do we live ethically in the marketplace?
Okay, color me intrigued, but we're talking about the 13th century here. Economic theory as we know it, well, it didn't really exist back then. What sorts of things was Olivi wrestling with?
He was particularly interested in the concept of the just price.
The just price.
The idea that there's a fair, morally acceptable price for goods and services, a concept that's still debated today.
Yeah, that's a tough one. How do you determine what's just when prices are always changing? Supply and demand, people's different ideas about value, it all seems so subjective.
Olivi recognized that complexity, for sure. He rejected the idea that there's one fixed just price for everything.
Makes sense. So what did he propose instead?
He argued that there's a range of acceptable prices, and this range can vary depending on a bunch of factors.
So it's not about finding one magic number. It's more about finding a balance, a middle ground between extremes.
Exactly. He even compares the just price to virtue, which in ethics is often seen as a mean between two vices.
Interesting. So just as courage is a balance between recklessness and cowardice.
The just price is a balance between overcharging and underselling. You've got it.
So it's not just about maximizing profit or getting the absolute lowest price possible. There's a moral dimension to buying and selling, this need to think about fairness, the well-being of everyone involved.
Precisely. And you know what's remarkable? Olivi considered all sorts of factors.
Like what?
The cost of production, for one. The quality of the goods, of course. The needs of the buyer. Even the common estimation of value within a community.
Wow, that's a very holistic approach. It's like he's trying to bring together economic reality with ethical principles.
He really is. You can almost say he's laying the groundwork for a more socially conscious way of thinking about economics.
And remember, he's writing all this at a time when the market economy was just starting to emerge, right? He's seeing trade grow and thinking about, well, what does this mean for how we should live?
And those are struggles we're still facing today, trying to find that balance between economic efficiency and social responsibility.
Between profit and the common good.
Exactly. Olivia's ideas remind us that economics isn't just about numbers and graphs.
It's about people.
Yes, relationships, the choices we make about how we interact in the marketplace.
Choices that have real moral weight.
They do. It's a powerful message, one we could all stand to hear more often, whether we're philosophers or economists or just regular folks navigating this complex world.
Well said. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the mind of Peter John Olivi, what's the final takeaway? What should we remember about this thinker?
I think it's clear that Olivi was no ordinary 13th century thinker.
That's for sure.
He was a radical, an innovator, a true visionary. He challenged the status quo and pushed philosophical thought in new directions.
From Aristotle's categories to free will, self-awareness, perception, even economics. He showed us that philosophy isn't just an abstract game.
It's about engaging with the real world, grappling with the big questions, and trying to live a better life.
A more meaningful life, a more ethical life.
Exactly.
And he reminds us that there's always more to discover, more to question, more to debate. And that even ideas from centuries ago can still speak to us today, shaping how we understand ourselves and the world around us.
They really can. It's amazing.
So if you're looking for a philosophical adventure, Olivi is definitely your guy. you might be surprised at what you find.
You definitely might. He's full of surprises.
And remember that thought-provoking question we left you with. Could Olivi's emphasis on the will's self-determination give us a new perspective on moral responsibility? Especially in a world where, neuroscience and determinism often seem to challenge the idea of free will.
It's a question worth pondering, and who knows, it might lead you down your own deep dive into the rich and fascinating world of Peter John Olivi.
That's it for this episode, folks. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into medieval philosophy. We'll see you next time.